Here.
Piedmont Smith,
Here.
Scambaluri,
Here.
Rallo,
Here.
Sandberg,
Here.
Smith, Volin.
Thank you. And seeing that we have a quorum of in-person members in chambers, and actually we have a full, if we count the Zoom participants, we have a full contingent tonight. So let me just go ahead and summarize our agenda. Council President Scambaluri asked me to preside over the meeting since she would not be available in person. So our agenda includes approval of minutes, reports, that includes council member reports, any reports from the mayor and city offices. At this time, I will note that the report from the Bloomington Arts Commission has been postponed due to illness. And then we will have a review of the Community Advisory on Public Safety Commission. Then we move to reports from council committees, if there are any, and reports from the public. That's the first opportunity for members of the public to comment on items not on our agenda. Next, we'll move to appointments to boards and commissions. The next part of our agenda is legislation for second readings and resolutions, although we have none. And then we will go to legislation for first readings, where we have ordinance 2322 to vacate public parcels, 2 12-foot wide alley segments located between West 1st Street, West 2nd Street, South Rogers Street, and South Walker Street. The City of Bloomington Redevelopment Commission is the petitioner. And our second item for first reading is ordinance 23-23 to amend Title 15 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Vehicles and Traffic in regard to amending Section 15-12-010, stop intersections, to remove a stop intersection from Schedule A and to add a multi-stop intersection to Schedule B. I believe that's about 7th and Dunn Street. We then move to an additional public comment period for items not on the agenda, and then we will address any items of the council schedule and adjourn. So I believe we have 2 sets of minutes to approve. One set is a correction from last time. Yes. Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. Councilmember Flaherty, could you please read our land and labor acknowledgement?
Yes. This is the land and labor acknowledgement for City of Bloomington. We recognize that the City of Bloomington sits on native land. The city, as well as city administrative buildings, are on the traditional homelands of the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people, and we acknowledge they are past, present, and future caretakers of this land. We also acknowledge that much of the economic progress and development in Indiana, and specifically Bloomington, resulted from the unpaid labor and forced servitude of people of color, specifically enslaved African labor. We acknowledge that this land remains home to and a site of gathering and healing for many indigenous and other people of color, and commit to the work necessary to create and promote a more equitable and just Bloomington. We move forward knowing and acknowledging our rich, complicated, and sometimes painful past so that we can learn from it and create a true land of opportunity.
Thank you. Now we have moved to approval of minutes. Do I have a motion?
Madam Vice President, I move that the regular session meetings for December 7th, 2022 and December 21st be approved.
Just to clarify, I would second that, but it would be the December 7th regular session as corrected. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Yes.
And then I will second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that the minutes of December 7th, 2022 as corrected and December 21st, 2022 be approved. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Flaherty,
Here, I'm sorry, yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Scambaluri,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Volin.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Those minutes are approved. We will next move to reports from council members. Councilmember Volin, do you have a report tonight?
I do. I wanted to make note of a couple of articles that are on the front page of the virtual paper, the Herald Times. that both have to do with the public right-of-way. The first has to do with, I'm trying to find the name of the person affected here, Amanda Whitaker, who was walking on the Beeline Trail with a friend when a bicyclist, who later was found knowingly was operating the bike without working brakes, ran directly into her. The story recounts that she was hospitalized and has suffered serious injuries, but that he, at the site of the incident, the bicyclist was let go. I don't quite understand why assault and battery charges don't apply to someone who's clearly operating such a vehicle recklessly on the Beeline Trail. And she's currently pursuing, she's interested in seeing what can be done to make the trail safer between bicyclists and pedestrians. Another article that came out, I think yesterday, but is still on the front page, has an unfortunate headline. It says, IU student seriously hurt when scooter crashes into SUV on campus. The video of this incident was caught just the other day on a car's dash cam. And while it shows that the scooter rider made some poor choices in operating the vehicle, a couple of things are not clear from this headline. First of all, if you watch the video, you'll find that the scooter did not crash into the SUV crashed into the scooter cut in front of it. So that makes the headline incorrect in the first place. Secondly, if you watch the video, you'll see that the scooter rider entered the intersection while the light was still green. And despite cutting across a lane of traffic, the SUV that was coming the other way, this is the corner of 10th and Woodlawn, the SUV entered the intersection in what looks like the yellow. It's not clear enough from this one vantage point, but it's worth investigating. And it's certainly clear enough that it makes me question the way that this was phrased, because it is very, very common for people to who are not users of scooters to denigrate the scooters and their uses. There's a lot to be examined here, but it's clear that we have an ongoing problem with the different speeds that people travel at, that we need to make sure that we're always, I guess you could say, punching up and not punching down, that cars should have the greatest regulation, scooters, bicycles, and then, and that we should be keeping pedestrians at our foremost in our thoughts when it comes to affecting speed in the streets, but that we also need to rethink our streets and our paths to minimize the chance that this kind of thing can't happen again. But it also includes thinking twice about how we talk about different modes of transit. They're all valid. They're all valid. The problem isn't with any one operator. If they operate inappropriately, they should be punished. But it's as much to do with the way we design our right-of-way than anything else. And I urge people to follow both of these stories to see and think about the transportation choices that we're making. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith, do you have a report?
I do.
I'd like to give a report to the council and the public on the 9/11 Plan Commission meeting. The items of note were there was a resolution for removal of negative easement relating to a PUD that is 55-99, which was some years ago, and this is in regards to the Old Marsh site on the east side that they're working to get an Academy Sports there, a sports store there. And so this is something that's kind of been going on for a little while now, and the group that's doing it, they are working with city staff, and they put together some language to remove the negative easement, which was specifically some trees that were between the Old Marsh and a potential apartment complex that's why the barrier was needed. And there's no apartment complex there. It's now an outbuilding, and there's a dialysis and nail parlors and things. So that becomes moot. So the city has worked with Brian Inc., who will be renting that. It's right now Kroger has a long-term lease on it, and they're going to give it up so that site can be reinvigorated. And it looks like a really great idea and a good store. And it will make that area energized and, a lot of good business over there. So now that negative easement will be decided upon tomorrow at the Bloomington zoning of appeals, or I may have said that wrong, but it's a zoning appeals tomorrow. And there really, nobody has any problems with it. Sounds good. It seems like it would be fine because the problem became moot because there was no apartment built there and the PUD is expired from that period. It's about 10, 12 years ago. So that was really important, at least for people on the east side. The other thing that probably was important to say is that the Sudbury development that's going on, we had a really nice report and update from Travis Venzel, Tyler Ridge, and Angela Parker, who's the legal counsel. And let me see, it's the second of the hearings on the Sudbury development. It is further refining and taking the comments that were made in the last couple times, further refining it, and they're anticipating that in November, when Plan Commission meets, that they will have a mostly final version of the PUD that will be out there. Probably the biggest change was that instead of 6,000 approximate units, they're talking like about 4,300 approximate units. Again, there's going to be 15% of affordable housing at 120% of AMI, and it will be spread throughout the 5 kind of neighborhoods that they're creating. It to me looks like a great project. It's quite complicated. It's humongous. It's going to take them. They've extended it. They think maybe it's going to be 12 years before it totally gets finished. So let's see. I think that's probably the things that the concerns. There were some concerns in the public. Again, it's people wonder about the mix of rentals and items for sale, purchasable properties, not yet determined because it's not yet totally, the total plan is not yet finished. And there's still some worries about the flooding, which apparently in that area does happen quite often under big rains. They're waiting on a traffic study and they're waiting on an environmental impact study. I don't think they were even done at the last meeting on 9/11. We think they'll be done by the November meeting. If they are not, the project will be continued to the December meeting so that all that can be factored in before it's developed and presented. That's all I have for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sandberg, do you have a report?
No, thanks.
Councilmember Rallo?
No report, thank you.
Council President Scambolery, do you have a report?
No report this evening. Thank you.
Councilmember Sims?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I do have a couple of things this evening. And pardon me, I'm a little under the weather, so I'm trying to stay alert here. But the first thing I'd like to say is acknowledge and congratulations to all of our Hispanic brothers and sisters for Hispanic Heritage Month. And I believe that's from September 15th until October 15th, if I'm not mistaken. one of the similarities between Black History Month and Hispanic Heritage Month is that both of those recognitions began with one day recognitions and celebrations. Then they moved to 1 week, and now both have a national month-long celebration that's acknowledged by this country. So just wanted to say well wishes to our Hispanic brothers and sisters, and let's all celebrate this month. The second point, I believe it was on last meeting, my esteemed colleague, Councilmember Boland, brought up the fact that a Mr. Barrio Jr., an IU student who went to a parking lot at the SRSC, I believe, left. The fee was $3. He had cash, but they only take cards. And apparently the line was long, so they told him to go, and basically he assumed that that fee, instead of $3, would be $13.50 applied to his bursar bill, as best as I can ascertain. But after that, 2 officers responded to his residence, and of course he was treated not the best and arrested. All of this for a $3 parking ticket. First thing I'd like to say, wouldn't it have been amazing that if the officers were there to just actually simply pick up $3? If we're going to respond, then a lot of this other would not have happened. As many of you know, IUPD Police Chief Lee is no longer affiliated with the university. I can assume that it is related to this incident. And Mr. Barrio, of course, filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the university. It has been settled, and as with most settlements, I do believe that there's a non-disclosure agreement. So we may or may not hear much more about the results of that lawsuit. And that was for a violation of his civil rights, false arrest, and I believe it's one other thing. Now, IU, I think the officials would have this, say this is settled. But I think it goes a little deeper than it. We're talking about a culture, I do believe. The first thing I want to know is, how has that parking lot attendant been trained to handle such situations like that? I'll remind you, this was a $3 parking ticket. The next thing I'm concerned with or wonder, the 2 responding officers who were sent to his residence, what about the next level at the chain of command who either ordered or instructed them to go to his residence? And I'd also want to know with IUPD, what are their diversity training guidelines, specifically with anti-bias and anti-racial training, or in racial training, I'm sorry, anti-bias and racial training. I think these are some questions that go a little deeper than the surface and the headlines. And I just want my colleagues in this community to think about those terms, and hopefully we can make other progress throughout the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Sims. Councilmember Flaherty?
Report, thank you.
All right, and Councilmember Rosenbarger and I have a joint report on the local progress national convening, which we attended along with Councilmember Flaherty on September 7th through 9th. And Councilmember Rosenbarger, would you like to start? We have a slideshow here as well.
Hi, yep, sure. So the 3 of us attended the national convening in St. Louis. This is a convening for progressive local elected officials. So there were folks on the school board from across the country, and city council members, county council, and some mayors, I would say. And Local Progress is a national organization that helps local electeds with policy making, progressive policy making, and resources and connections to folks doing the work across the country.
So one of the first presentations I attended was about getting public input into the budget process. And in Chicago, they had a really interesting process for the 2021 budget, so it's been a couple years, where they partnered with a nonprofit to go out into communities. They picked 13 neighborhoods that have been traditionally underserved and actually asked people, what does your community need to be safe and thriving? And their method was interesting because it was really hands-on. It was, publicizing there's going to be a meeting at your neighborhood park, and they had this board with different categories, and they gave people like 10 chips and put it, as many chips in the different categories that you think should be the priority for the city's budget. And then they compiled that information, and they also had an online survey, and they used that to guide their budget decisions for 2021.
Another session that I think the three of us attended was on policing and the prison system, and it asked the question, do I have a role as a local elected official or as a city council member? And so this session, along with some others, started with defining public safety, and I just wanted to read that. Real safety is when people have everything they need to thrive: a place to live, a dignified job that provides economic security and access to opportunities, and the resources to care for themselves and their loved ones. For too long, we've relied solely on policing and punishment, while at the same time underinvesting in public housing, infrastructure, schools, and healthcare, which has caused decades of harm in Black and brown communities. It does not have to be this way.
So we talked about how we can break down systems of oppression and build up systems of support. So this is all key to a thriving community and to public safety, according to the broader definition that my colleague just read. So some of the examples from different cities are help for domestic violence survivors without involving the police, because many times they do not want to involve the police, but they still need help. The use of tax revenues for such things as youth programming, low-income housing, and social services instead of expanding the carceral or prison system. Support for mediation services. And this was an interesting specific example. Lowering the barriers for becoming a street vendor to make that a more accessible option for people to generate income and support themselves, and which also would lead to less police involvement if there were less requirements that people needed to meet for that activity. Next slide. Please.
Oh.
Nope.
For some reason, it's not going.
Oh.
How's it getting? One is getting skipped. Huh. Well, one example.
Do we have it in a future? Maybe they got out of order.
No, it's right here as number 5. Okay, well, it's okay. It's a Durham, North Carolina example that I'll just talk about. It's, so Durham created what they call the HEART program, and it has 4 components. This is in line with the breaking down systems of oppression and building up systems of support as well. So the first part of this program is the crisis call diversion, and that embeds mental health clinicians in Durham's 911 call center. The second part of this is community response teams, and those dispatch unarmed 3-person teams as first responders to nonviolent behavioral health and quality of life calls for service. The third part is care navigation. So care navigators follow up with people after meeting with one of our first responders to help connect to the community-based care they need and want. And then the fourth part is co-response. So co-response pairs clinicians with Durham police officers to respond to certain calls for service that pose a greater potential safety risk.
And in general, this conference or convening was really full of resources and readings. And so in our slides, we just wanted to add in 4 really neat links and helpful links for public safety. And one is a free public safety 10-week class that is with and for community. It is 10 1.5-hour sessions, and anyone can do it. And we could do something here like it and have everyone or have groups do it together. But it doesn't have any homework, and all of the reading and material is in that 1.5-hour lesson for 10 weeks. We also received a really useful flow chart for decision making, and it was about who was helped and who was harmed by any decision. And so we will, I think, share that at some point with our colleagues. And then Durham's HEART program has a dashboard where they keep track of all the work they're doing, and that is linked. And then Local Progress on its own website has creating a community responder program booklet pretty much for communities to use. Oh, it did somehow get out of order. Okay.
Okay, so another workshop that we attended was called Supporting Our Unhoused Neighbors. And kind of an overview of that is, first of all, we talked about how the status quo is not working. The system is broken. Next, we have to triage solutions in the current system to help people basically stay alive and thrive, while at the same time we're working to address the roots of homelessness. So interim solutions that were discussed are probably familiar to many here in the community: rapid rehousing, emergency shelter, and safe spaces to park and to camp.
One example is from Denver. Of course, Denver is a much larger city than us, but a lot of the cities across the U.S., no matter the size, are facing some of the same problems. So similar to us, they have a 98% occupancy rate in their housing. They, in 2020, started a safe parking and camping program. And so some of the takeaways from that were, as you can see in the picture, they had uniform tents set up. So these were supplied by the city and their partners. The city of Denver also, of course, got a lot more ARPA funding than we did, and they donated $80 million of funds to this program. It was piloted in 2020 and then codified in 2023, so they had some bumps and made some changes, but codified that in 2023. They also started a housing court to decriminalize some offenses like public intoxication and public urination, so folks were diverted from jail. And then Denver has an affordable housing fund where 40% of that fund goes to unhoused housing and 10% goes to supportive services.
I see that we've used up 20 minutes in this portion of the agenda, which is usually limited to 20 minutes. Unless I hear any opposition from my colleagues, I would like to extend this for another 10 minutes maximum.
So moved.
We'll do that by unanimous consent, hearing and seeing no. We have no objections on Zoom. Mr. Lucas?
That I see, no.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure unanimous consent's actually allowable when we have remote folks.
Okay.
A roll call vote might be necessary.
All right, so is there a second to Councilmember Volan's motion?
Staff can check on that. Also, I could be wrong. That was just what I thought.
Unanimous consent is fine. If a member has an objection, they would speak up.
All right, then, we'll move ahead. So another interim solution was presented by Oklahoma City. They have a program called Key to Home Partnership, and their goal was to eliminate encampments with a goal of 75% reduction of homelessness within 2 years. And this was just started this year, I believe. So their first They've closed 2 or 3 encampments, and these are the steps that they followed. So first, they reached out to the people in the encampment, talked to them, see what needs they had. Then they identified available rental units in the community, which may be easier in Oklahoma City than in Bloomington, Indiana, but this is what they were able to do. And then they helped people from the encampment move in and stabilize within those available rental units as a scattered site supportive housing network. Kind of like we do have scattered sites for the Beacon, and the name escapes me, the Beacon housing on South Henderson. What's it called? Never mind. Crawford Homes, yes. Crawford Homes has a scattered site program too, so that's the model that they used in step 3. And then they closed that particular encampment site and would monitor it to make sure that people did not come back. So that was an interesting model to hear about at the conference.
This is also yours.
Okay, so we also talked about maintaining current affordable housing. One workshop was focused on gentrification and the problem of, pricing people out of their homes. A lot of it was focused on Philadelphia. They have a neighborhood preservation initiative there. They also have an eviction diversion program. Pittsburgh, they used a real estate transfer tax of 5% on real estate transactions to support retention of affordable housing. And in St. Louis itself, also there, it's not up there, but there's an initiative called Rooted, Cultivating Black Wealth, in place. And that is to focus on Black neighborhoods and make sure people can own their homes there and stay in their family homes. So that's an interesting local example we heard about.
So that's a highlight from some of the sessions we attended. I also attended one on transition, since we have a new mayor coming in and many new council members. That was very useful. If anyone would like more information, that is the website, localprogress.org. I think these slides went out in a packet addendum, and then if you would like, if not, if you would like a copy, you can contact the council office.
And we should mention the 4th person in the photo is Hopi Stossberg, who is the Democratic nominee for council in District 3. So she was also at the conference. All right. Next on our agenda, we have reports from the mayor and city offices. As I mentioned earlier, the Bloomington Arts Commission report will be rescheduled for another evening due to illness of the person who was to give the report. So then we come to a review of the Community Advisory on Public Safety Commission, which is an unusual thing for us to do. It's a relatively new commission, and when it was created, it included a review after 2 years. And I'm going to ask Council Attorney Lucas to just explain what this review is about and how we can perhaps go about it.
Yes, thank you. As Councilmember Piedmont-Smith noted, this review was called for in the establishing legislation for the commission. That was Ordinance 2020 that was adopted near the end of 2020. That ordinance set out the goal of the CAPS Commission, which is to increase the safety of all Bloomington community members, especially those often marginalized due to race, disability, gender, sexual identity, or sexual orientation. It also set out several purposes and duties of the commission that were included in the memo for tonight's meeting. As part of that ordinance, the council called for a review of the need for and efficacy of the commission 2 years after the commission's first meeting. The commission first met in May of 2021, so we're a little over 2 years from that date. The memo I provided to the council mentions the approximate number of meetings held by the full commission since that date, and notes that the commission has also met several times through different committees. The council has heard 2 annual reports from the CAPS Commission recently, I believe in August, and there are a number of items that the commission has published on its webpage to advocate for different positions, and that webpage also includes a fairly lengthy report recently produced by the commission making several recommendations related to public safety alternatives. I will note the ordinance that set up the commission doesn't specify any action for the council to take other than reviewing the need for and efficacy of the commission. So tonight's agenda includes this item to give you all a chance to do that. That could simply be a discussion, however much discussion you feel is appropriate. I will note that absent a member of the council or the administration bringing forward an ordinance to make any changes to the commission, whether that be a change to the membership, a number of seats, whatever those changes might be, the commission would continue to operate as called for by local codes. So that's sort of the starting point. Tonight's an opportunity to review the commission. I will note the commission, one of the commission co-chairs, Jason McCulloch, is joining us on Zoom. He was gracious enough to be here tonight in case there are questions for him. I'll leave it at that and let members ask questions or discuss as you feel appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Would any council members like to, I guess we'll start with questions. Are there any questions for either Mr. Lucas or the co-chair who is with us this evening, Jason McCulloch? Yes, Councilmember Sims?
Thank you. I just have one. Oops, sounds like I have a double voice coming. What I'd like to know, when the CAPS Commission was started, I believe there were 11 positions. There were commissioners that were selected from different populations throughout the city, I think. My question is, are we fully staffed on that commission? I believe with the 11 members, or are we short? And do we have plans to fill that commission if not?
Mr. Lucas, would you like to field that?
The commission has 11 total seats. I believe 6 are currently filled. So there are 5 vacancies. I would note that the commission has rarely had all 11 seats filled for long, any length of time. I think that may be true of other commissions that have difficulties keeping seats filled. So I don't know that that's a unique problem, but I would say that's been an ongoing challenge. Many of the folks who have stepped off the commission, at least more recently, I believe, have done so due to scheduling conflicts with their jobs, school, other things going on in their life. So,
thank you.
Perhaps I could just follow up a little bit on Councilmember Sims' question. Are there applicants that the interview committee could review, and maybe somebody from the interview committee that is relevant here could speak to that? Councilmember Scavalari, are you on that committee?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Yes, we were just notified a couple days ago that we have some new applications in, and so we have an opportunity to do those interviews. We just haven't all been in town at the same time. So yes, is the short answer. We have some new applicants. We're very well aware of the unfilled positions on the CAPS Commission. And I do have a question, if that's appropriate, or I could wait.
If you wouldn't mind waiting, Councilmember Volan had his hand up first, but I'll come right back to you.
Oh, sure.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Councilmember Volan.
Yes, I'd like to give Mr. McCulloch a chance to talk about the state of the commission, specifically with respect to what Councilmember Sims was referring to, there are in fact a bare majority of seats filled, and that seems to have been one of the greatest challenges of this commission is filling all the seats. Can the commission talk about how this has affected its ability to deliberate, whether or not it would be of value to reduce the size of the commission, and to characterize as best they can why, besides the recent schedule conflicts, it might have been so difficult to staff the commission or to fill the seats. Mr. Michalek, can you say something about it?
Mr. Michalek, are you available online to respond to that?
And also clarification on how your name is pronounced, because I keep screwing it up. Is he here?
Okay.
Madam Chair, perhaps if we can go to Councilmember Scambolery, perhaps she has a question that doesn't require Mr. Halleck's presence.
Okay, why don't we do that, and then we'll come back to your question, Councilmember Volin. Councilmember Scambolery.
Actually, my question does require Mr. Mahala, so.
Okay, we will,
So please create a diversion and stall for a minute, so.
I have a diversion.
Councilmember Smith.
If I may ask, well, I was going to ask Mr. Lucas, but he's really busy. If someone would just review the goal of the commission, and then when we speak of what's been going on, then we'll just have an idea of the context.
I can do that. So the legislation that created the commission has the following 4 purposes for it. Perform research and gather data on the perceptions and preferences about public safety from community members with specific focus on perceptions and preference data gathered from minority community members, individuals who are disabled, and other often marginalized community members. Number 2, research evidence-based alternatives to traditional policing. Number 3, identify best practices in public safety globally and evaluate the efficacy of such practices for implementation in Bloomington. And number 4, make recommendations to the Common Council, the Board of Public Safety, and/or the mayor or the mayor's designee on policies and programs that enhance public safety for all community members.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Mr. Lucas, would we have any success?
I believe Mr. McCulloch's trying to rejoin the meeting. That may take just another minute.
Okay. Are there any other questions that are not for Mr. McCulloch? I also need to learn how to pronounce his name correctly. Sorry. Okay, I don't see any, so we will just wait for a moment. Then after questions, we will have an opportunity for comment as well among council members. Okay, so the current co-chair of the Community Advisory on Public Safety Commission is joining us, and there he is, Jason McCulloch.
Excellent. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Welcome. Could you please state your name so that we know how to pronounce it?
Yeah, and so we say Macallick, but Councilmember Scamilleri is right. Mahalik is the culturally appropriate way to pronounce it, so we mispronounce it.
Okay. Well, in any case, welcome. Did you hear Councilmember Volan's question, or should he repeat it?
Yeah, maybe repeat it.
Okay.
I had an initial response, but I don't want to miss any part.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the specific concern that I've frankly always had about the commission is its size. There are 11 seats. While we were waiting for you to rejoin, I've been looking at, as of right now, there are 6 seats filled. A couple of people I know have just resigned this month, and Mr. Lucas says it's due to scheduling issues, but there is a litany of people who've been on the commission for 3 months and have left, 6 months and have left. And again, there are so many seats open that it begs the question, should the commission be as big as it is? Can it do with 9 or 7 members? To what extent does the lack of filled seats affect the commission's ability to both deliberate and to make recommendations?
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you for your question, Councilmember Volan. So I would say from my experience that one of the difficulties, one of the benefit, but also difficulty of pulling people with lived experience for a commission like this is that those people necessarily have constraints. So a lot of the people, so I've been on the commission for a little over a year and a half, and people who have come and gone have gone because they have those constraints that of life constraints, which is sad because every member who has stepped off the commission had a good perspective that we lost. And so we try to retain those. I would say there's not a noticeable detriment to having open seats. We don't notice when those seats aren't filled. It's only a problem if the seats are filled by people who are unable to attend. But usually if they're unable to attend in regular ways that would harm the quorum of the commission, they have to step off. So I wouldn't see a benefit to reducing the size. We have talked about recruitment, trying to recruit more people. And we actually got another member from the town hall event that we put on. Other than that, though, we have continually tried to reach out to marginalized communities to gain more members from various different demographics.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCulloch. Councilmember Scamilleri, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Mahalik, are there any, my question is much along the same vein, and that's the potential of being shorthanded or short-staffed, so to speak, on this commission. Given that many seats have gone unfilled, are there any viewpoints that you feel haven't been well represented over the past few years?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Councilmember Scamilleri. So I would say what's difficult is people who might feel like they'd be alienated, right? So we think about, more openly conservative views or things like that. I would say that we're starting to get people who can represent that. But then also, we only have, representation from prominent racial groups, right? Like Black and Latino, but we're only just now starting to get people from beyond that. And we have never, I don't think in the time I've been on it, we haven't had somebody who could speak to the lived reality of an Asian American. And we've had plenty of issues with marginalization in Bloomington for Asian communities. So that would be one demographic that we don't have anybody who could speak to.
Okay. Thank you. May I follow up, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
I need a little bit of runway for this question, so bear with me for a second. One of my concerns when we first began talking about the CAPS Commission a couple of years ago is that the very nature of boards and commissions, as you've suggested, doesn't lend itself well to everybody's life. It lends itself well to those who have their own computers and those who have their own Wi-Fi access and those who can attend boards and commission meetings and so forth. And so I'd like to ask a broader question. Is there some way to rethink or reimagine the CAPS Commission such that it would be more open to those with some of the lived experiences that we're seeking? I don't have a magic answer to that in my head. But again, I know the very nature of boards and commissions might make this difficult and these positions difficult to fill. So is there something we haven't thought of in terms of how to structure this or what our practices are that would allow us to reach more people? Is there anything you could think of?
Well,
and maybe there's not at this moment, but I think it's a question worth asking.
Yeah, certainly not restructure. Like, I don't have an idea of how it might be structured better. I can say that when I first started on the commission, we just did kind of surveys. The research committee did surveys, but with our alternative public safety outreach, I feel like we've been actually reaching more people because we've been going to those communities. So like the service centers for people experiencing homelessness, which doesn't get their voices directly heard, but we're able to represent exactly what they say and to quote them. In terms of restructuring it in a way that's more open, it's difficult because, you know, in governance, everyone has to be represented. Even in a public meeting of the city council, you have public comment is limited. So I don't know. It's a good question though.
No, I appreciate you kind of thinking out loud with me about that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, and we are approaching the 20-minute mark for this portion of the agenda that is limited to 20 minutes. So unless there's any opposition, if we could extend for another maximum of another 10 minutes. Any opposition? No. Okay, good. Any other questions from council members? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Oh, there is one? I'm sorry.
Councilmember Sims?
Yes, Councilmember Sims, sorry. Please go ahead.
That's okay, thank you. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Mahalik. Thank you for clarifying that as well. Basically, since this is the report that the commission should give to the council, or one of them, the annual reports, I think. And something I think that would be good for community awareness and part of this record, I believe there's 11 positions and each one of those are intended to capture a certain demographic or a population throughout the city. Can you, just for the sake of this meeting, and those that are interested, can you run through those 11? And I mean, I don't need exhaustive, but what are they?
I'm sorry, can I just insert a point of information here? There are not like specific seats designated for specific types of community members. That's not the way the commission was set up. Am I misunderstanding, Councilmember Sims?
No, there's not seats per se, but we wanted to capture certain demographics across the city. homeless, those recently incarcerated, that sort of thing. So if that's improper, you can let me know, but I think that's important for the awareness of community members trying to get a better understanding of this commission and their potential work.
Okay, fine.
Is that sufficient?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
I thought you meant, seat number 1 is for this population, seat number 2 is for this population, but I understand now.
No, I don't think any of our boards or commissions are set up that way, actually, but.
All right, Mr. Michaela, can you?
Perhaps I can help here. The ordinance itself lists qualifications for applicants, but also notes that certain residents from historically underrepresented groups are strongly encouraged to apply, and goes on to list those communities, including residents who are Black, Latinx, people of color, people with disabilities, people who are experiencing or who have experienced mental health challenges, people who express non-binary gender identity or non-cisgender, people who are experiencing or who have experienced homelessness, who are experiencing or who have experienced domestic violence, people who have a previous record of incarceration, people with addictions, and people who have a demonstrated background of empowering historically disadvantaged groups and working to further racial, social, and economic equity. I believe that's what Councilmember Sims was referencing in the question.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. McCulloch, can you speak to the current makeup and what kind of community groups may be represented?
Yeah. So let me just take a look at the chairs or currently.
Point of order. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Mahalik. I guess I have a concern that I wanted to raise before we proceed, which is a level of, given the limited nature of the commission, and I think speaking generally to its representation over time might be more appropriate than identifying particular characteristics that might be marginalized or oppressed or otherwise targeted in our society in a public setting like this. I just wanted to raise that caution and concern, I guess.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Flaherty. I think that's a very good point. Maybe you could speak more generally about which voices have been heard or have participated in the CAPS without saying.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Specifically. Yes, Councilmember Sims.
Point of order. Yes, I simply wanted to go down the list on the demographics we were looking to serve this commission. Nothing more, nothing less. I don't want to get in. It was not my intent to get all into the weeds on all of these, but there are 11 specific demographics, and I think Mr. Lucas read those off as they were in the ordinance. So that's sufficient for me.
Oh, okay. All right. So I misunderstood. You didn't want to match them up with committee members or anything.
No. I just think this is important information for the community at large. Not everyone is aware of the work of this commission and how it was established and what we're trying to get and some of its challenges. And that's all I was just trying to establish. So again, thank you, Mr. Mahalik.
Thank you for clarifying, Councilmember Sims. Other questions? All right, let's move on to Councilmember comments. Are there any comments in regard to the review of the CAPS Commission? Councilmember Volin?
I think the answer to my earlier question perhaps puts the later question about the makeup of the commission to rest. I feel satisfied that despite the fact that we have open seats, at least there is room to solicit the participation of groups that may not be represented on the commission yet, and that it's really more a matter of who and to what extent are they doing the soliciting. I don't know that it should be solely up to the CAPT Commission to solicit members. I think it's up to all of us, especially considering this is a council-created commission and all 11 seats are appointed by the council. So I think it's up to all of us to try to recruit and encourage people to take part in this commission in particular. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Councilmember Flaherty.
Thank you. First, to note that the Council Special Committee on Council Processes is undertaking the NOVAC report, NOVAC Consulting Group's organizational assessment of boards and commissions more broadly, and something we discussed in our meeting last week and plan to do is to actually look at kind of the purview and focus of most of the city's boards and commissions. Not all of them. Some of them are sort of bodies that only serve the Board of Parks Commissioners, for instance, or the mayor, and are a little bit less relevant to council's work. But the majority of them we're trying to take up and revisit and say, how's it going? Are you focusing on what your original charter was intended? Are there changes or structures that could be different to help you? So we're kind of undertaking some level of review and reconsideration of purview for all of our boards and commissions, which I think is a good thing to do. And I think this complements that. I think the language referenced by Mr. Lucas was the need for and efficacy of a commission. I think for me, the need for is still very much there and still an evolving question. I'll note that some of the things that were highlighted by Councilmembers Piedmont Smith and Rosenberger as best practices nationally that we learned firsthand about from council members and mayors and leaders from around the country are some of the best practices and examples and cited by the Commission in its extensive research in its role. So I think that's telling of the quality of the work they've done. I don't think the structure is the most, I don't think it's optimal in terms of its relation to the mayor's administration. And I think that was a product of focus and imperfect collaboration at the time of its formation. I'll note things that have worked on similar but different items include the Board of Public Safety, a Future of Policing Task Force, a racial justice task force. I think that's what it's called. I could be getting the name wrong. These are all sort of things on the mayor's side that have actually very little or no council involvement, not much visibility. And there were efforts to have a more collaborative approach that were not successful at that time. I remain very open to finding more collaborative structures, and I think we should be thinking critically about what type of evolutions might be helpful for this group. But in terms of their purview and the focus of a more rooted concept of public safety that has to do with people's basic ability to meet their own needs, I think that's still very much needed. In terms of the efficacy of, I'll note that the 2 annual reports we've gotten, especially the most recent one, are probably more robust and in depth than almost anything we get from any other commission. And also in city code, there's kind of an expanded version of what the commission shall do. It's actually, I think, 6 bullets. One of them has 3 sub-bullets. I kind of reviewed that in preparation for tonight's meeting, and I think they've done all of it. I think they've actually, at some level, done everything that's been tasked with that commission. And I want to thank them for their work, and I think it's a credit to the effort they've put in. So I think we should very much be thinking about how this should change or evolve over time, especially as any of the recommendations get taken up. But I think on the need for and efficacy of, I find it passes muster, personally, passes muster. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from council members? Well, I'll take the opportunity to weigh in. I agree with a lot of what Councilmember Flaherty said. The need for the commission is still very strong, and we learned at the local progress convening of some other some of the initiatives that CAPS actually has already studied, and some that maybe they have not. And I think that we have a lot of work to do to improve public safety for a broad swath of our community. And so, and we need guidance and advice for that. And I think that the CAPS Commission plays that vital role. I recognize the commission had some growing pains. It was a difficult beginning, and I think that is just the nature of starting a brand new commission, and also of seeking to be very democratic in its processes and very inclusive in its membership, and therefore including members who may not be used to working in a committee structure. But as Councilmember Flaherty said, I'm very impressed by the work that that the CAPS Commission has done, and their annual reports show that, and especially the recent alternatives to public safety report is very well researched and logically written and well documented, and has appendices of all the interviews done, and it's really, really important reading for local leaders. As far as work with the mayor's administration, I do think that with the new administration coming in, we could forge those relationships moving forward on the topic of public safety, and perhaps also on this commission. So any other comments before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay. Thank you, Mr. McCulloch, for being here this evening and for your leadership. So then we will move on to any reports from council committees. Are there any? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to our first segment of public comments on items not on the agenda. Can I see a show of hands of, well, I think the one. So we have two in chambers. No, we have one in chambers. And before that person speaks here in person, Attorney Stephen Lucas, could you please give the prompt for people participating via Zoom?
Yes, if there are folks joining electronically that would like to speak, please let us know by raising your hand in Zoom. You can find the raise hand button in your control bar under the Reactions tab or the More tab. If you can't locate that, please send a chat to the meeting host to let us know you'd like to speak.
All right, so we have one person here at the podium. Please state your name for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Hey, thanks. My name's Greg Alexander. When I heard some of the comments from last week's council meeting, I realized I owe you guys an update. 5 years ago, I started a campaign showing that sidewalks are missing, blocked, or closed. It's probably the only good advocacy idea that I've had. City departments had been failing to provide pedestrian facilities for so long that they were just used to it. Such abject failure, it begs for bluntness. In a context like that, I can contribute. But there have been some changes in 5 years. First off, starting this summer, engineering is writing tickets for vegetation blocking sidewalks. They added a new staff position, they worked out some legal questions, and this year they're writing the tickets. I can't report if it's having any effect. You know, there's still more to do, but I came here so many times and pointed out nothing is happening. Well, something's happening now. It's a first step. And engineering is also fining contractors that violate their maintenance of traffic plans. I went to the Board of Public Works back in July just to witness one of these enforcement actions. At that same July meeting, there was a petition to close the sidewalk just north of the new Verve apartments where Motel 6 used to be. The petitioner wanted to close the sidewalk for 2 years, the entire duration of their project. I've given the same speech about these years-long sidewalk closures about a dozen times. The speech never works, but I know it by heart. So since I was already there, I went ahead and wasted the board's time and repeated the speech. Then I sat down to watch them close the sidewalk. The board had a surprise for me. They tabled the closure. They wanted staff to work with the petitioner to come up with a better plan. What? As I left that meeting, I overheard the contractor asking staff if they could start work without the approval. I've heard this song before, so I put it on my to-do list. I went a couple times to take photos of the blocked sidewalk. Another surprise. I want to convey how disorienting this is for me. I perform this kind of inspection regularly. I never fail. I always find significant non-compliance. I have hundreds of photos of blocked sidewalks, but I failed. I couldn't photograph a blocked sidewalk because the sidewalk wasn't blocked. At the next Board of Public Works meeting, the city staff member reported that at this site, they would not be asking for a long closure, just brief closures for specific, utilities cuts, like they do for the cars. They said in the meantime, the contractor would install a fence to make sure that the construction site doesn't spill out into the right-of-way. I've heard that song before too. Instead of putting the fence beside the sidewalk, the contractor puts the fence on the sidewalk, so it's blocking half the sidewalk every single time like clockwork. So again, I went to photograph that blocked sidewalk. I went twice more. There was no blockage. The fence is where it belongs. I just do not believe this would be possible without city staff inspecting and demanding 100% compliance and bringing a credible threat of enforcement. This is phenomenal. So honestly, this puts me in a bind. I had an easy talking point that any council member could appreciate, and it's gone. City government is no longer asleep at the switch. Moving forward, I have to struggle with nuance. There is still a lot of work to do. For example, if I hadn't been there at that Public Works meeting, probably the sidewalk would be closed today and every day until summer of 2025. But I have to give a lot of credit to city staff, and I want to thank the Board of Public Works for standing up for pedestrians this time. And I am grateful to this body for passing the ordinance that authorizes enforcement. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Lucas, is there anybody on Zoom who would like to comment?
Yes, on Zoom we have Jamie.
Okay, please state your full name and you'll have up to 5 minutes to give your comments.
Oh, my name is, I'm sorry, I started hearing feedback. My name is Jamie Scholl, and I'm not sure if members of council were aware of the many negative comments on various social media regarding the 4-story tall tower as supposed to be a welcome. So I thought I might read some of these. I'm not going to identify anyone, but these are from next door as well as a few posts on Facebook. So comments, I'm sorry, I'll try to keep an eye on the time as well. This is a waste of resources. Pave and fix the roads and sidewalks and pay the city's maintenance workers a fair wage. This looks hideous. They better be using solar panels to light this ridiculous piece of art since we are encouraged to be less dependent on fossil fuels. I think people realize they are already in Bloomington when they reach 17th Street. It would be beneficial to prioritize addressing homelessness before constructing additional structures. It is important for Bloomington to consider the needs of its residents. Who do you think will bear the cost of these projects? Let's see, someone's comment seemed to be blocked. This is really obnoxious. The design brings to mind something relatable to pharaohs and George Washington. Oh, what's the name? Shoot, what is it? They couldn't even find a Bloomington firm to design this monstrosity. Someone else agrees with this. This is really offensive to our artistic town. It will create light pollution. It's ironic that one of this lighted structure's stated purposes is to reflect the extensive green infrastructure and native plantings at Miller Showers Park, as well as Bloomington's commitment to promote native plants and diversity, and to the city's longtime status as a Tree City, USA. This monument being green is as real as Bloomington being a tree city in something other than name. Scientific evidence suggests that artificial light at night has negative and deadly effects on many creatures, including amphibians, birds, mammals, insects, and plants. There's a link to darksky.org. How much of our tax money are we expected to pay for this thing, and can this bad decision be rescinded and the money put to good use? When was the public input discussion session? I wonder if there was one. A $1 million bird killer, just call it the Hamilton Monument. What can we do? Can we start and run a petition against it? Is there time to do that? There are several of us from different neighborhoods, and it would be a good beginning. Myself, I've never written a petition before, but well, it goes on and on. That's just one. But if I wasn't sure, I hadn't heard any other comments about this, and if the council has any say in if this progresses or not, I can firmly say that most, except for maybe 1 or 2 comments I've read, are totally not for this. They would like the money to be spent someplace else, and if it is going to be spent, that it would be hiring a local firm and local artists or artisans to construct something that truly represents our community. I know that one of these on the Bloomingtonian got over 893 comments. That's just one. Thanks for listening and for considering, see if there's something we could do to actually represent the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else on Zoom, Mr. Lucas? All right. We will move on to the next part of our agenda, which is appointments to boards and commissions. Do any of the interview teams have recommendations for appointments tonight? Okay. I will say that we have been approached by the Planning and Transportation Department to select somebody to serve on the Safe Streets for All Steering Committee. And Councilmember Rosenbarger has expressed her interest in this position. Is anybody else interested in this position? Mr. Lucas, do we need to take a vote on appointing Councilmember Rosenbarger?
I think it would be helpful, yes.
Okay. Well, I welcome a motion to that effect.
I move that Councilmember Rosenbarger be named to the Safe Streets, what is it again?
For All
Safe Streets for All
Steering Committee.
Steering Committee.
I'll second. All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes.
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 All right. With thanks to Councilmember Rosenbarger, she has now been appointed for the Safe Streets for All Steering Committee. We have no legislation for second readings or resolutions this evening, so we will move on to legislation for first readings.
Madam Chair, I move that ordinance 2322 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second?
All right. Will the clerk please call the roll on the motion to introduce this ordinance?
Yes.
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 Thank you. That motion passes 9-0. Will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2322 to vacate public parcels regarding two 12-foot wide alley segments located between West First Street, West Second Street, South Rogers Street, and South Walker Street. City of Bloomington Redevelopment Commission petitioner. The synopsis is as follows. The petitioner, City of Bloomington Redevelopment Commission, requests vacation of two segments of alley right-of-way that were previously used as part of the Minute Health parking lot to facilitate the development of the local neighborhood. The east-west segment will be replaced by an alley slightly further east-west. The north-south alley will be partially replaced by pedestrian easement.
Thank you. And that
I
will,
move that ordinance 2323 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second?
and before the clerk calls the roll on introduction of this ordinance, I just want to clarify that ordinance 2322 will move to second reading at our regular session on October 4th. So Clerk Bolden, could you please call the roll on introduction of ordinance 2323? Yes.
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 That motion is adopted by a vote of 9-0, and ordinance 2323 will also be heard at our regular session on October 4th. Now we come to a period of additional public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Mr. Lucas, can you please make the announcement for anyone on Zoom?
Yes, if there are any members of the public that wish to speak at this.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Clerk Bolton. I'm very sorry. Yes, the whole point of the vote was to ask you to read and give us the synopsis. Please go ahead.
Ordinance 2323 to amend Title 15 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Vehicles and Traffic, regulating Section 15.12.010, stop intersections, to remove the stop intersection from Schedule A and add a multi-stop intersection to Schedule B. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance amends Title 15, Vehicles and Traffic of the Bloomington Municipal Code and comes forth at the request of City staff, the Traffic Commission, and the Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Commission. The ordinance makes the following change. Places a stop intersection with a multi-stop intersection on 7th Street.
Thank you very much. My apologies for the error. So now we go to additional public comment. Mr. Lucas, please go ahead and make the announcement.
Yes, if any members of the public on Zoom would like to speak, please let us know by raising your hand or by sending a chat to the meeting host.
And is there anybody in chambers who would like to make a comment at this time? I don't see any. Are there any takers on Zoom, Mr. Lucas?
Not that I see, no.
All right, well, we'll move on to matters of council schedule. And I believe we have the special committee on council processes that will meet tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Is that in the McCloskey room, Mr. Lucas?
Upstairs in the Allison conference room.
Okay, in the Allison conference room and also online. We have a special session immediately followed by Committee of the Whole next Wednesday. That will be to discuss the legislation that comprises the budget for the City of Bloomington, Bloomington Transit, and Utilities. That is scheduled for next Wednesday. Anything else, Mr. Lucas? No. Okay, thank you very much. If there's nothing else, for the good of the order, we shall adjourn. Thank you all very much.